Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. As the election for the leadership of the Conservative Party that brings with it the prime ministership of the country enters its second and final phase, we ask, could Rishi Sunak become the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom? Joining me to answer and discuss that question is the former Secretary of State for International Development, former Chief Whip of the Conservative Party, and a Tory MP of 30 years standing, Andrew Mitchell. Andrew Mitchell, let me start with the question that everyone in India wants to hear the answer to. What are Rishi Sunak's chances of becoming the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
Well, hello, Karen, and very nice to see you again on this, in Britain, momentous day, a very, very hot day, but also an important day as we have whittled down the number of candidates to two, one of whom is Rishi Sunak, and I will be supporting him. I have supported him since my candidate, Jeremy Hunt, lost out early last week. So I'm supporting Rishi Sunak, and I think he has an extremely good chance of winning. It's going to be quite a tough fight. He's not the front runner at the moment, but I think his innate qualities and experience and character will propel him to the prime ministership in the United Kingdom.
Let's take up that thought that the man that you support, who you think has an extremely good chance of winning, actually faces a pretty tough fight ahead of him. Now, clearly, the voting so far has established that Rishi Sunak is the popular candidate as far as Tory MPs are concerned. But how do you account for the fact that a YouGov poll released on Tuesday said that in a head-to-head contest with Liz Truss, Penny Mordaunt, and Kemi Badenoch, where the party membership would be voting, Rishi would lose to all three? How do you account for that?
Well, it is true that at the moment, he is probably behind with the membership. And remember that this is a poll for the next prime minister, but on everyone's minds, and in particular, the people who will be voting, those 166,000, 200,000 Conservative Party members, they want to win the next election. And there are other polls that have come out in the last few days, two very important and creditable polls in the United Kingdom, which show that he is the one of those four who is most likely to beat Keir Starmer. So when the membership of the Conservative Party come to cast their vote, when they have watched the hustings, when they've looked at the polls, when they've looked at what both these highly credible candidates have to offer, I think the thing that will matter most is who is going to win the next election, who is going to beat Keir Starmer. And on that count, Rishi Sunak wins.
Let me ask you bluntly, will the Tory shires, where a lot of the membership of your party is, accept an Indian origin prime minister? Will his race and his ethnicity be a problem in their eyes?
It's very interesting, how much Britain has changed in recent years. Firstly, remember, he was the candidate and then the Member of Parliament who followed William Hague in Richmond in Yorkshire. Now, you couldn't get a more Yorkshire English seat than that. And they chose in a very, very strong field. They chose Rishi Sunak to become their member of parliament, and they have really taken him to their heart. They adore him in Richmond. He's a very good member of parliament and very highly respected. And then, Karen, look at the 8 candidates who started off this competition. And you can see that 3 of them are women. I think 4 of them are from ethnic minority communities. And I think that says something about Britain. But above all, it says something about the Conservative Party. And remember that none of the other parties have even been led by a woman, let alone someone from one of the minority communities. And I think it's to the credit of the Conservative Party. And it may help explain why we have been in power now for 12 years and have the real chance of winning a historic 5th general election in probably around 2 years' time.
All right, let's leave race and ethnicity aside. Let's focus a little on the other principal concerns surrounding Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. First, how much damage was done by his wife's non-dom tax status, which of course she has changed since it was revealed. But my question is this: has the fact that the Chancellor's wife is worth more than 700 million, but has so far paid no tax on that wealth in the UK, damaged Rishi Sunak's moral standing?
Well, I don't think it has, although, as you rightly infer, there was a considerable row about that. I'm personally absolutely neuralgic about bringing people's families into public life when they are not themselves public figures. So I think there is a degree of sympathy for his family on the issue, as well as concern and worry about her previous tax status. But no one is suggesting that her tax status was in any sense unlawful. She was carrying on in a way that was entirely within the conventions. And Rishi Sunak has explained that and has now made changes accordingly. So I think both that and, of course, the issue of the green card, I think those issues are now behind him. And the very considerable virtues which he presents in this competition, which no doubt we're going to come on and talk about, are the ones that predominate.
You're pretty confident that even the issue of the green card, which he held for several months, whilst he was also Chancellor of the Exchequer, is an issue that's behind him. I know he didn't hide it. He had actually made it clear he had it. But nonetheless, when the news broke, it was pretty damaging at the time.
Well, you know, there are people in Parliament who have passports, have 2 passports, some for other countries. I don't think there's any big issue there. And I think he never hid it and he explained it. And I certainly accept that explanation. And I think most of my Conservative Party colleagues do.
What about the fact that the Tories are traditionally a low tax party? This is an article almost of sacred belief. But Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, has pushed up taxes pretty substantially. And now he's pretty certain when he says that he's not going to be able to reduce them until inflation first comes under control. Does that not go against the grain of Conservative thinking?
Well, I think, first of all, those of us who grew up in an era of high inflation know how desperately damaging inflation is if it becomes endemic. And there is a real chance in Britain that inflation is going to peak in the next few months and then start coming back down quite significantly. So the fight against inflation is, in my view, incredibly important. Secondly, you know, this was the Chancellor of the Exchequer who was faced in a 1 in 100 year event. It was the event of COVID. And he very skillfully put in place measures which protected something like 12 million jobs and livelihoods and 1.5 million businesses. And I think if you look around the responses from finance ministers around the world, around the developed world, you can see that the scheme which he introduced was one of the best introduced anywhere in the world. And so I think what he had to handle a very difficult problem. He handled it very well. But of course, the level of debt, something like 400 billion pounds, $500 billion is very substantial. And no chancellor in living memory has had to deal with that. And bear in mind that we only in Britain paid off the final instalment of the war debt from the Second World War, something like 10 years ago when George Osborne was Prime Minister. So I think one has to cut him a bit of slack for the crises he had to deal with and the debt that was racked up. But Rishi Sunak is the first to say that this money must be repaid, and that is why he's being so fiscally responsible when it comes to taxation.
I can certainly see that you're prepared to cut Rishi Sunak a bit of slack, but then you're one of his supporters. You want him to become Prime Minister. But what about Tory opinion in the Shires? Will they understand and be as accepting of the high taxation he's imposed? Not just the national insurance that went up earlier, but the increase in corporate tax that happens next April?
I think that amongst the Tory members out in the Shires to whom you refer, they are of a profile. They're your and my sort of age by profile. There's a lot of younger people too. But I think predominantly they are slightly older, and I think they will worry very greatly about their children's mortgages, their children's standard of living, the importance of getting inflation down, the importance of getting growth back into our economy. We're flatlining on growth at the moment, about the pensions of themselves and their colleagues and relations. And when they think about those things, they will ask themselves the question, who is the most experienced, the most adept at handling the fifth largest economy in the world? And I think the fact that Rishi Sunak dealt with the pandemic, has been blooded during some extraordinarily difficult years as our Minister of Finance, I think that will pay very strongly and play very strongly with people out in the country when they come to cast their vote.
One more question about Rishi Sunak before I turn to Liz Truss. There is a view that his initial campaign video was a bit too slick, a bit too smooth for conservative taste. In fact, Fraser Nelson, the editor of The Spectator, said that it gave the impression as if he was performing to a handbook that had been written. Do you share that criticism?
No, I don't. I think that people have to find their mark on videos and presentations, and both the candidates who are in the final now have changed their style a little bit as a result of that. I think that for some time now, many of us had concluded that Boris Johnson had to go. On the 31st of January, I said in the House of Commons to him that he had to, that I thought he should go. I thought his time was up. And it wasn't so much because of the policies he was pursuing. It was because of the character of the Prime Minister. And I don't think that, I think that he has many brilliant qualities. He's a very entertaining fellow, very charismatic. But I don't think he has the qualities required of a modern Prime Minister rather than an entertainer. And so I had the deepest concern back in January this year. It is inconceivable that any member of Boris Johnson's cabinet wasn't thinking about those concerns. And something like 50 members of the government have resigned. So Rishi Sunak knew that Boris Johnson's time in government was in very considerable difficulty. He had many people within the Conservative Party urging him to consider running. He wouldn't have been human if he wasn't thinking carefully about the best interests of the Conservative Party, the best interests of the country, and indeed the best interests of himself. But he stayed a very, very long time till, as he said, he really thought he couldn't do so anymore, and that is when he resigned.
There is a criticism being made in Britain that, in fact, the video that he put out might have been made 4 or 5 months earlier.
Well, I have no idea about that. It's quite tough being Chancellor of the Exchequer in the United Kingdom, as it is being a finance minister in any country around the world. And he looked to me pretty similar in the video to how he looks today. So I don't think one can draw that conclusion.
All right, let's come to Liz Truss, the other contender. I know you don't support her. You've made it clear you want Rishi to win. But in the eyes of the Conservative Party membership, what is it that gives her at this moment a bit of an edge over Rishi? What are her strengths in their eyes?
Well, I think probably she is seen as the more right-wing candidate, paradoxically, although she voted Remain in the referendum and was previously a Liberal Democrat, whereas Rishi voted to leave. He was a Brexiteer. Indeed, he was a Brexiteer when it wasn't necessarily in the interests of his career. So it is curious. I mean, I do think that Liz Truss is a very credible candidate. She's done a very good job at the Foreign Office. She listens to people and she's very attractive. And it's a good thing that the Conservative Party is now having a contest between two such able and credible figures. But I do think that the central problem facing Britain is the issue of the cost of living. People's living standards are being eroded by not just by inflation, but by the fact that the economy has no growth in it. And so what we need is the best possible person to tackle those problems, which are predominantly financial and economic. And that's why I think Rishi has the edge over Liz Truss.
She didn't come across as the best possible person during the debates. To be honest, she didn't sparkle during the two debates. Can she make up for that at the hustings, or will her lack of fluency, if I can put it like that, her lack of conviction, if I can put it like that, be a problem at the hustings as well?
Well, I think that the more of these things you do, they're very, very high pressure, none more so than the first one. Which I think all the candidates, struggled slightly to get the measure of it. But you saw in the second debate how much they had all overcome that. And I think the more of these things you do, there's another one, I think, over the weekend, the more of these things you do, the more fluent you get. So I would expect both of them to put on a superb performance at the hustings, and that they will be questioned closely by members. But as I say, I do think it is the economic questions and the economic situation which will tend to dominate. That's where Rishi has the edge. And I think that the international crisis, the crisis in Europe and Ukraine, is one where there isn't much difference in policy between any of the senior politicians in Britain. We all think the same way about that.
Let's take up that thought that it's the economic issues that matter, and it's the economic issues that will dominate the campaign hereafter. Writing in the Mail this morning, Liz Truss has committed herself to cutting taxes, and I believe pretty sharply at that. Separately, writing in the Telegraph this morning, Rishi Sunak has declared himself to be a Thatcherite and has promised equally radical reform. Which of these two appeals do you think will work better with the Conservative Party membership? Being Thatcherite and a reformer, or cutting taxes?
Well, in the minds of many Conservative voters, those two things are pretty close together. So I think if you accept my argument that at the hustings, it will be the economic situation which dominates because of the standard of living issues, the cost of living and the growth issues, how you get the economy to move forward. I think that the expertise each of them shows about how you balance the books. I mean, remember that Mrs. Thatcher did not cut taxes in the earlier years. She cut taxes towards the end of her time, or the second half of her time in government. And what Rishi Sunak is saying is that he does want to cut tax. In his bones, he is a low tax Conservative. But having had custody for the economy through these very difficult times, his economic judgment is that now is not the time to be cutting taxes. He hopes it will come, and he believes it will come before the next election. And I think the conviction and experience that he brings to this argument is likely to be very effective at the hustings as our members listen to what both candidates have to say.
So if economics is the main issue, the cost of living is the main issue, as all the polls suggest, and as you've been saying yourself, does Rishi Sunak have an advantage having been Chancellor for the last 2.5 years? Or is that actually going to put him at a disadvantage because of the way he's committed himself to high taxes? I know I'm coming back to that question, but it becomes central if economics is the key issue.
Yes, that is right. But I think that the experience of being, if I may use a cricketing analogy, at the crease when the bowling is so very difficult, and having managed the economy through these extraordinarily turbulent economic times, that gives him an edge. And remember, both these two politicians are low tax Conservatives. They both want to bring tax down. It's not like Labour politicians who tend to believe that by raising tax, the government spends money better. That's not the policy of either of these two. They want low tax. And in a way, the issue is not if, but when. And Rishi's arguments about the right time to cut tax, given his experience over the last 2.5 years, I think will be very convincing.
Now, a couple of days ago, the Times newspaper reported that Boris Johnson, your present incumbent Prime Minister, is behind an anyone but Rishi campaign. A, do you believe that? And B, if it turns out to be true, could it damage Rishi or will it be irrelevant?
Well, I very much hope it isn't true. I think that as Prime Minister, he should stand above the fray in these times. And I think it would be bad for him personally, and certainly bad for the role of Prime Minister, for him to mix it in this contest as vigorously as your question suggests. But undoubtedly, he will have his views, and being Boris, he will make sure those views are heard.
But the Times newspaper suggests he's particularly angry, upset with Rishi. He thinks Rishi is the person who's responsible for forcing his resignation, not Sajid Javid. And he's determined to get, in quotes, his revenge. Does that worry you?
I think you have to accept, Karen, that journalistic hyperbole may overstate the emotions and the feelings of the Prime Minister in this article in the newspapers. As I say, I think he would be very wise not to mix it in the contest, but I'm sure his views will be known.
We're coming to the end of this interview. You've been an MP for 21 years from Sutton Coldfield. Before that, you were an MP from Gedling for 10 years. That makes you a Tory MP of 30 years experience and understanding of the party's membership. Do you believe, come the result on the 5th of September, this will be a close race which could go either way? Or do you think it's likely that one or other, and in your eyes, I presume you hope it's Rishi, will actually pull considerably ahead of the loser?
I think it will be a close race. And I think that the die will be cast quite early on, because the ballot papers will be sent out in very early August, and our members tend to receive the ballot paper, put their cross in the box and post it back. So I think that the die will be cast quite early on. And what will move the dial is the nature of the debate at the hustings, when our members are able to watch and see these two very considerable candidates arguing about the issues of the day. But I think it is the economic expertise and experience that Rishi Sunak has, which will pull him ahead with our membership when they have a chance to judge both candidates during these very important hustings meetings, which will take place in the weeks ahead.
And you remain convinced that Rishi is the likely winner?
I believe that it is in the best interests of the Conservative Party and of the country that Rishi Sunak is our next Prime Minister, but I accept that Liz Truss is an extremely creditable and able challenger.
Andrew Mitchell, thank you very much for making time for me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.